Hello, everybody. It is a pleasure to be with you. So, wherever you are today and whatever time it is in your neck of the woods, welcome. We are excited to welcome you to Purelite Ventures Presents Accelerators, Mentorship, and Scalability within Healthcare Venture Capital. My name is Nanaya, and I am the managing partner at Purelite Ventures. Purelite Ventures operates as a healthcare vertically specific fund in the US. Callie Stryker is a Purelite Ventures fellow who is active within the healthcare VC space. Please reach out to us via LinkedIn with your healthcare vertical pitch decks for our review. So today we have an exciting topic. Many founders are interested in accelerators and mentorship for very good reasons because they lead to sustained scalability. So there are some purposes that we find these do. So venture capital accelerators are programs that are designed to help early stage startups grow and succeed. They provide them with mentorship, resources, and funding within a structured and time-limited framework. They also serve as a bridge for startups seeking to accelerate their development and position themselves for future growth and investment. They also provide networking opportunities and structured development of the startups into mature companies. They can lead to market validation exposure and also operational support. There are some examples of accelerators like Techstars, of which Hannah has been the investment manager of Techstars Chicago. I have served as a mentor there. There's also Project 28 that comes out of Columbia Venture Community, and also Nucleate, for example, that deals with healthcare specifically. Y Combinator is famous, and we know that it comes out of Yale as well. And they created the investment vehicle called the SAFE, which is really important for founders to learn about. Now, also mentorship as a particular type of guidance is very important because it can last for a lifetime. And it also doesn't necessarily confine itself to the time span that an accelerator has. Mentorship can last a lifetime. And it provides strategic guidance. It helps to leverage the experience of the mentor, not only in the professional realm, but also personally. And so many founders find mentorship extremely valuable. And with all of this that I have said, I am so excited, and without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Hannah Savage. She's an experienced venture capital investor and a mentor who's reviewed thousands of startups and invested in over 60 companies globally. She has deep understanding of the mechanics of accelerators and the critical role of mentorship. Ms. Savage is passionate about helping founders unlock potential and build scalable, impactful businesses. Through her consulting and mentorship work, Hannah shares actionable insights on navigating challenges of entrepreneurship and driving meaningful growth as the founder of her new company, Elevate Global. Please welcome Hannah Savage along with me to Purelite Ventures Presents.
Thank you, Nanaya, for that very gracious introduction. I really appreciate it. Just give you a quick background on myself. Nanaya did a great job, but I spent 2.5 years at Techstars. I probably went through 10,000 companies. I ran 5 different programs, Techstars Payments, which was fintech, blockchain, and Latin America. I worked on Industries of the Future, which was global deep tech, and Techstars Chicago, which was global AI. And so I have really seen startups like across the spectrum. I've seen health tech, I've seen biotech, fintech, you name it, I've seen it. And now I'm really excited to be launching my own company, Elevate Global, where I will be working very closely with startups to help them build sustainable growth. So thank you, Nanaya, so much for having me. I'm very much looking forward to our discussion.
Oh, you're very welcome. And if you are excited, I'm going to say that I'm even more excited because I know what you've been doing over these years and how impactful it has even been. And how you've even done work outside of the US, going to Latin America, speaking at different venues over there, and just really supporting the ecosystem globally. So I'm excited. And let's sort of just dive in right now and get some of these amazing questions that we have for you out in the open that you can work with them. So my first question is, why did you gravitate towards working at Techstars? And what inspires you to continue to be active in this particular space?
Yeah, so working at Techstars gave me exposure to early stage companies. These are companies that could potentially have an idea on a napkin. And earlier, I had been looking at companies that were a little bit later, maybe seed through Series B type companies, with Venture University out of San Francisco. And so transitioning into Techstars gave me a very different perspective, something that I hadn't seen before. And it also gave me exposure to global markets as well, because the first program that I was on at Techstars was Techstars Payments, which did focus on Latin America. And I have an international business degree, and so I very much enjoy exploring other places. I lived in the Middle East for 2 years. And so this was very much in line with who I am and what I wanted to do. So, I got to see there's a lot of volume when you're working at an accelerator as opposed to when you're working at a more traditional fund, because we're looking at things in like a very, very short time frame. So our sourcing period would be for 3 months. And the goal would be for me to look at about 3,000 companies in that 3 months. I would meet with probably 10% of those. 20 of them would go to a screening committee. And then from there, it would be either 10 or 12 that would be selected to go through a final program. And so I got a lot of repetitions at Techstars.
Yeah.
And investing is a muscle. And the more you do it, the more that muscle grows. So that was really, really important to me. Really the exposure and the experience. And when you're working in an accelerator, startups will tell you what's going wrong. Whereas that's a very, very different perspective than when you're talking to a startup at a fund. They're going to tell you all of the things that are going well, all of the things, their vision and their hopes and their dreams. But they're a little bit more reserved when they're talking to an investor about the challenges. When you're working at an accelerator, that's very, very different. The startups, they should be, and most of them are, very honest and upfront about the things that are going wrong. And so it's a very, very different way to look at a startup and to evaluate them, to work with founders on a very, very personal basis. And so there was a lot of value of having that experience of working at an accelerator.
Wow, I love that. It's really interesting that you mentioned that you get to really go into the inner parts of a startup and hear the truth about what's happening, because the founders are looking for help. They're not necessarily looking to raise. So they're putting everything forward. And I think that's a wonderful thing, because if something is hidden, you can't really solve that problem.
Exactly. If we don't know about it, we can't help. And part of the reason that you would join an accelerator is to work out the kinks, to scale. And so it is really important for founders to be open and honest when they're working with, an accelerator or a mentor, or a consultant or a coach. It's a very, very different relationship than, maybe with a typical VC.
Mm-hmm. Well said. My next question is, how does a founder decide when it's the right time to work with an accelerator or an organization like your own, Elevate Global?
So, there are a couple of different things to keep in mind when you're thinking about joining an accelerator. When you're thinking about joining an accelerator, they're typically, let's say, like 3 to 6 months. So you need to be able to set that time aside and be able to work very intensely during that time. So you need to consider if you have the time to do it, because it takes a lot of resources. And one of the things that I noticed about Techstars is we're not going to make you show up for meetings if you don't want to. We don't make you show up for our one-on-ones. We don't make you sign up for the workshops. That's very much on you. And if you don't have the time to do it, you're not going to get out of it what you really want. So I think time is something really important to consider when deciding to work with an accelerator. The second thing is, I think, to understand where your business is at and like what that specific accelerator is looking for, because there are different accelerators that are going to offer different levels of support. Generally, accelerators are for early stage companies, right? Pre-seed, sometimes seed. And depending on the accelerator or depending on maybe the managing director that's running your program, some will want to see revenue. Some are okay with having it be before revenue. So I think understanding the problems that are in your business that you want to be addressed is really important, whether you want to decide, like, are we ready for an accelerator, or like, are we at the point where we have some really good foundations, but we need to help like working the kinks. The other thing to consider is equity. If you are going through an accelerator just for the money, I wouldn't recommend that approach, because accelerators take a decent chunk of equity. So I can speak to the Techstars deal. Techstars takes 6% equity and gives you $20,000. So that is a that's expensive equity that you're giving away. And so you need to make sure that the resources that the accelerator is providing are really going to give you that value. So maybe like when you're looking at accelerators, you want to look at who's in their network, right? Because network is really important. So what kind of mentorship are they offering? Very specifically, like maybe who is the team that you're working with? What is their background? What is their expertise? What kind of workshops are they offering? Are these things really going to be relevant to what I'm building? And so those are some things I think are really important to think about when you're going through an accelerator. I think the other thing that's really important is funding at the end of an accelerator is not guaranteed. It is not. I think a lot of founders have a misconception that if they get accepted into a Techstars or some kind of other accelerator, that once they graduate from the program, that automatically guarantees that they will be able to fundraise. And that is certainly not the case. It depends on where you are in your business. Maybe you pivoted and you're not quite ready to raise again, or maybe you didn't put the time in, or there are a whole host of things that could be the reason why you're not raising at the end of an accelerator. But just it's really, really important to understand that funding is not guaranteed at the end of an accelerator.
That is a very good point, and one that a lot of people don't know about. Thank you for that. I'm also going to ask about, why are accelerators and mentors important for startup growth? What makes them unique and qualified to do this important work?
So accelerators are really structured environments where a startup can receive really intensive support and resources. They can be anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So again, I'm going to reiterate about the time commitment that goes into working with joining an accelerator. So growth is something that can happen during an accelerator, right? They're designed to scale very quickly. You can move really, really fast in an accelerator if you're set up to do that, if you already have some of those foundations to be able to move you forward. So this could be something like refining your business model, right? Getting some initial customer traction. Who is your customer? Sometimes if you come into an accelerator and you don't know who your customer is, the accelerator can certainly help you figure that out. But that might be a case where at the end of the accelerator, you're not raising any money because it took you this time during the accelerator to figure out who your customer is. And that's great. That's really, really important. But now you have to go out, you have to start talking to those customers, you have to start either getting them on a wait list or getting them to pay. And so the other thing that accelerators can help with is mentorship and networking. Usually, accelerators will bring in industry experts, other successful entrepreneurs, investors who can provide like very high quality mentorship. And so your network immediately should expand and should grow when you join an accelerator. There are other things like other kinds of expert guidance in key areas because startups often lack expertise. Maybe you're a non-technical founder and you need technical support. An accelerator can help you with that by bringing in experts. Maybe you need like legal advice. A lot of times these mentors could be attorneys that might be able to help you. And then the final thing that's really important about accelerators is like this accountability and this focus. You should be able to define like what are some very key metrics that you want to achieve by the end of your accelerator, and you will ideally be able to hit these goals. And these can come from this should come from your team, but you'll have people that can help you. This can be whoever's working on the accelerators, your managing team. This could be the mentors that you meet. But a lot of the times, the value that comes from accelerators are the people that you're going through the accelerator with. It's your fellow founders. You'll be able to bounce ideas off of them. They'll be able to hold you accountable. At Techstars, we would have weekly check-ins and we would ask you, okay, what was your progress from last week to this week? But the key there is you have to show up. You have to show up and you have to put in the work. We can't hold you accountable if you're not there. So I would say that's an accelerator. Mentors provide a very different kind of value. So mentors can offer you very, very tailored advice. And it's not a one size fits all approach like an accelerator is. And so often, right, accelerators will bring in mentors and you'll get both. But you don't have to go through an accelerator to have a mentor, which is really great. With mentors, they're often former founders, so they've gone through it themselves, and they can tell you what they did, what made them successful. You can learn from somebody else's mistakes, but you also have to consider something like, when did this person build their startup? Was it the same environment as mine? Were the issues that they have gone through, were they the same? Does it make sense? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. Mentors, I think probably like where they provide like the greatest resource to a startup is just moral support. Like building a company is really stressful and it can be really, really lonely. If your family, if your friends, if they're not on board, if they don't understand what you're doing, if you have this really, really relentless passion about your company, but nobody can figure out like why, like you have your blinders on and this is the only thing that you're focusing on, and then something goes wrong and it feels like your world is falling down. Having a mentor that you can call and a shoulder to cry on can really, really make a world of difference. And so I think that is something that is so, so important to have a mentor. A mentor can also hold you accountable. You can have like weekly calls, maybe it's bi-weekly calls with your mentor, and they're going to hold you to it, right? And long-term relationships. So if you go through an accelerator, it's 3, maybe 6 months long. Maybe you keep in contact with the team, maybe you don't. But a mentor can really be for life. It can be a very long-lasting relationship. So there are different benefits that you'll get from a mentor that you'll get from an accelerator.
Well said. I will go to our next question. Now, how does equity work within the accelerator framework? I know you mentioned what Techstars does, 6%, and then also $20,000 provided that particular startup is able to win that amount of funding. But I would love it if you spoke about it a little bit more. And we can probably move into some of the functions of convertible notes and safes after that question?
Sure. So every accelerator is different. They will offer you different terms. Sometimes it's straight equity. Sometimes they'll use a convertible note. Sometimes they'll use a safe. And so it really depends on the accelerator. For instance, like I'll use the Techstars example again. So Techstars is $20,000 for 6% equity, non-negotiable. You have to take it. But then there's an optional $100,000 convertible note, which is different than maybe what Y Combinator will use, which is a safe. Which is a simple agreement for future equity. And I know this can be really confusing. What's the difference? When should I use this one? When should I use that one? What does a priced round mean? And that can be a webinar all in its own, just talking about the differences there. But to really make it quick and easy, here is a table that I have. So 2 different instruments here, right? Keep in mind when you're either using a safe or a convertible note, essentially what you're doing is the investor is giving you money and you are promising them that at some future date, you will give them equity, meaning you will give them shares in your company. But right now, the investor they don't actually have any of those shares. So these are both for future looking. A safe is considered equity, and then a convertible note is considered debt. So it's like a loan. And there are 2 features that we can find on a safe and a convertible note. They'll both typically have a valuation cap and a conversion discount. These will be determined whichever one is better for the investor is typically which one that they will use. So you won't use both. And I have an example of that, but let me talk about these other things first. So maturity date. There is no maturity date for a safe because it's not a loan, right? But if we have a convertible note, there is a maturity date and it will also include interest because it's a loan. So let's say an investor gives you $100,000 and there's an 8% interest rate. When your convertible note converts into equity, you then owe that investor $108,000 in shares. And there's a maturity date on a convertible note. So it can be a little bit challenging, or I think it can give founders, when you're getting close to that maturity date, it can make you squirm a little bit because you're not sure, am I going to have to repay this loan? And I don't have any money to repay this loan. So it can be a little bit challenging for founders. Very oftentimes, though, this is negotiable with your investor. If you need more time to convert this equity, the maturity date, if both parties agree, it's negotiable, so you can push that out. A safe is an equity instrument, so it doesn't have any interest, right? Convertible note does. And then there are different ways in which a convertible note and a safe will convert into equity. A convertible note will convert into equity at a next qualified financing round. And that's going to depend on what that qualified financing is in your loan documents. This is going to be different. Usually it's a priced round, meaning the investors are all taking straight equity. They're not giving you any kind of debt. They're not giving you any kind of safes. And then you will have to repay that loan if you decide not to convert. So it's a little bit more strict for the founder, but it gives the investor a little bit more of a feeling of safety. Whereas a safe, it doesn't have a minimum fundraising threshold in order for you to convert. So let's say that your qualified financing round is $1 million for the safe. If the next round that you raise is $500,000, you don't have to convert that equity yet. So there's a little bit more wiggle room with a safe, but you also have to keep in mind when you're using safes and convertible notes that you have to be really careful of how you're tracking your dilution, because sometimes it can be a little bit surprising when you convert and you think, oh, I got diluted a lot more than I really thought that I did. So it's important to keep a close eye on these things and how they will affect you.
You know what? You bring up a really good point about dilution. Could you elaborate on what that means a little bit more?
Sure. So dilution affects everybody who has any kind of equity in your company. So it affects the founders, it affects investors, and you will become, as a founder, you will become diluted over time, meaning that you will own less and less of your company as you raise subsequent rounds. Your investors will also become diluted as you raise subsequent rounds. And so everybody wants to make sure that they have, the best piece of the pie that they possibly can, because that means that when you have an exit, they get a bigger reward. So there are typically like different ideas around how much equity a founder should own at different rounds. And I think the general rule of thumb is you give up like 15 to 20% a round. And at like a Series A, you should really own 50% of your company. So that's something to keep in mind as you're using these different financing instruments, these safes, these convertible notes. Because once you raise a priced round, let's say, the lead investor will typically ask for a board seat, meaning that you are now starting to give up more and more control of your company.
Mm-hmm.
So in the very beginning, founders might want to raise on a safe and a convertible note because they're not giving up any of that control yet to an investor.
Okay.
So these instruments are very often used at the earlier stages to allow a founder to have more control. They're also faster. They're a little bit easier. It doesn't require the same legwork that a priced round will. With a safe, you can take the money in on a rolling basis. So if you're raising $500,000 for your pre-seed on a safe, you can take checks as they roll in. Whereas if you're raising a priced round, you have to have a lead investor who will set the terms. You'll have to close the round. So these instruments allow founders to collect money a little bit more quickly and with a little less friction.
Wonderful. And then also on the investor side, we do have a thing called a follow-on round. And I would love it if you talk a little bit about how follow-on rounds help in terms of dilution.
So an investor might want to follow on in your company to maintain perhaps the same percentage ownership that they had from the previous round. So if, and oftentimes funds will set aside a portion of their capital for follow-ons and companies that they really, really believe in, and they want to double down and they want to make sure, hey, we owned 10% at the pre-seed round. We think this company is really going somewhere. So at the seed round, we're going to put in another check to maintain our equity stake in that company.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I think there is another slide, but if you'd like me to pull that up, I can do that for you now. I can pull it up a little later when you need it.
So what do you think? I have the next two slides are an example of like the valuation cap and the discount in a safe or a convertible note. And then I also have an example of like a pre-money and a post-money safe.
I think those would be fantastic. I'm going to
put the
next one on.
Yeah, let's look at those. Okay. So I was mentioning before that if you have a safe or a convertible note, that these will come with two features. There will be a discount and there will be a valuation cap. So let's look at two different scenarios here. So let's say that you were raising $1 million on a safe, and you have a valuation cap of $5 million. That means that you are valuing your company at $5 million. Now, you are going to also give that investor a 20% discount. That means if they are buying a share for $1, they will then get to buy that share for 80 cents. So let's say that now you're going into your next round. You're now raising an equity round at a $10 million valuation. So you have doubled your valuation from that $5 million to that $10 million with investors. So the new investors are purchasing shares at $2 a share. So that's what that will look like. Now let's talk about if the safe investor will convert based on the lower price, right? We have a discount, which will allow them to purchase the share for $1.60, assuming that like the $10 million valuation means we're purchasing shares at $2. They get a 20% discount. So now the investor is purchasing shares at $1.60. And if you have a valuation cap, you take your initial valuation, so $5 million, and you divide it by your price round valuation, which is $10 million, which means this is $2, but now the investor gets half of that. So it's $1 per share. So here, the valuation cap actually gets them shares at $1 instead of $1.60. So they are going to take the valuation cap instead of the discount because it gets them a better deal on the share price.
Right. Fantastic. And the next slide.
So this is really important when you are looking at safes. Safe will have not just safes, but in general, but when you're looking at a safe, you will either have a pre-money valuation safe or you'll have a post-money valuation safe. And the reason that this is really important to understand is because of the concept of dilution that we talked about earlier. So how much are you going to be diluted as a founder? How much potentially will an investor be diluted? The first scenario is that you have a pre-money valuation of $4 million. So that means before anybody gives you any money, you're valuing your company at $4 million. Then you have an investor who comes in and who gives you $1 million. And now your company is worth $5 million. So what percentage of the company does the investor own? Well, they own 1/5 of your company, which is 20%. Mm-hmm. Now, if we have a post-money valuation, the investor gives you $1 million, but we're valuing your company still at $4 million. That $1 million, we're not adding it on top of anything. It's included in that $4 million price. So now the investor actually owns 25% of your company as opposed to 20%. So you are 5% more diluted as a founder if you raise this on a post-money safe. So when you are going in and you're negotiating, you need to really understand if the investor is investing on a pre or a post-money safe so that you understand what your dilution is.
That is fantastic. Thank you for that, Hannah. The next question that I would like to ask is, what accelerates proof of concept and letters of intent generation for startups? We're turning a little bit of a corner here. We were doing a little bit of math, but now we're back to more of a qualitative discussion.
So what generates a proof of concept?
So what accelerates?
Accelerates a proof of concept.
letter of intent generation for startups. So what kind of things would make a startup more attractive to partnerships, basically?
To partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this to me it's a traction question, right? We want to see the founder, the company moving forward. I think investors all have varying opinions on letters of intent and how valuable those are. I think it very much depends on who that letter of intent is coming from. That can be really important. Is it a really large enterprise company, or maybe that letter of intent is from another startup? Those things mean very, very different things. So I think the quality of your letter of intent is something that's really important. If you can show, maybe you only have one letter of intent, maybe you have two, like considering if you're working like with these B2B enterprises, that sales cycle is probably going to be a lot longer, just even getting to the letter of intent. So it can show that you've put in a lot of work, you've been grinding, like with a B2B enterprise company, whereas with a startup company, like they're moving quickly. So they might, really want to sign something with you, but they might also not have the resources or as much, their pockets aren't as deep as that like big B2B. As far as like accelerating a proof of concept, can you clarify like what you mean on that a little bit more?
Of course. So especially in here, we look for an MVP that has some proof of concept or some actionable results that show that what they're doing, what they're working on, actually works and is actually beneficial to the patients that they will see or the patients that will use that particular product. Another thing that we like to see is if these particular, if the market that they are looking for is actually attracted to the startup as well and will pay for what they're offering, right? So that's what I mean when I'm talking about proof of concept.
Sure. So like how do you accelerate that? Is that what the question is?
Mm-hmm.
I think this one is tricky because this has a lot to do with customer discovery and understanding what your customer really wants, what the problems are really that they're facing. So I think in order like to accelerate your proof of concept, you have to take a couple of steps backwards. And you need to make sure that you have really defined who your customer is. So this is putting a customer profile together. Is this somebody who works in the pharmaceutical industry, or are these doctors? Are these payers? Like who exactly is that customer? Put that profile together. And then what you need to do is you need to do some discovery with them. You need to really, really understand what their pain points are. And that's how you're going to find, you're going to start developing this proof of concept that will start gaining traction, because now you are building something based off of real problems that people are experiencing. Something that I see a lot with founders is that they think that something is a problem, but they have not validated this. And so if you go back to the beginning and you do that legwork up front, you should be able to generate more traction with your proof of concept, because you are building out something that you know that solves a problem for somebody.
I love the way you answer that question. And so my next question is about Elevate Global. I would love to learn more about what you are doing there and how we can talk to how this can help founders who are not necessarily in an accelerator, but would like to have some type of experience that helps them to grow.
Sure. So Elevate Global is really designed to give founders very foundational skills. What
Hmm.
I found from working at Techstars is there are a lot of basics that founders don't know. And this is not their fault, because I think venture can be a very closed off and a very kind of mysterious um, type of field where the insiders are on the inside and the outsiders are on the outside. And so if you're a first time founder, trying to understand what a VC is looking for can be really, really challenging. Or even understanding how to get into an accelerator. Companies will often apply multiple times to an accelerator before they get in. So if you have the foundational skills before you join an accelerator, when you join that accelerator, you'll be able to move so much faster than you would have if you had to learn the basics and the foundational skills before them. So, my goal with Elevate Global is to open access to founders across the world and give them a platform where they can come in and they can work on the basics. And these are skills that they can take with them far beyond just a startup company. These are skills that can translate to many other things. And so it's really this like foundational skills that I'm building workshops for at Elevate Global.
That's fantastic. When I think about this, I know like when you're building something, you want to build it on sand, you want to build it on a rock, right?
Mm,
And so this is
exactly.
extremely important for founders to grasp that really getting these foundational, um, getting the foundational information that they need and applying it correctly will go a long way to taking their startup to an actual company and moving to exit or IPO, whatever it is that they would like to do or however they'd like to continue. But if those foundational things are not there, those foundational tenets are not included, they are looking for disaster. And of course, we want to avoid that by all means.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And remember, when you're going through an accelerator, they are still taking equity. So they are still looking for companies that have the potential to exit, which is one of the reasons why not every startup has access to an accelerator, because you might not be at the point where even an accelerator thinks that you have an exit potential. So, what I want to do is I want to give you the tools to either get into an accelerator, which will help you grow even faster, or maybe you can bypass the accelerator. Maybe you can do all of that growth on your own.
Mm, that's fantastic. I love that. Another thing that I would like to talk about a little bit is fundraising. So that's one of the things that founders may either love or hate, depending on their own personalities, and depending on their pain tolerance, right? For hearing a no, maybe more than yes. So I would love it if you spoke a bit about that and how startup founders can approach that and remain sane.
Fundraising, everyone's favorite topic. A lot of the times I will ask founders what are they struggling with? Like what is something that I can help you with? And if a founder says like the only thing that I need is to raise, for me that's a huge red flag.
Mm,
Big, big red flag. Because as an investor, if I'm going to give you money, I need to know how you're using that money. I need to
mhm,
know, like, are you spending that money on growth? Like, so fundraising is really, really tricky, right? There's a language that needs to be spoken between the founder and between the investor, and they have to understand each other. And sometimes it's really difficult because there are a lot of VCs who are not founder friendly, And there are a lot of founders who just don't understand how a VC works. And you have to understand like how a VC works, how a VC thinks in order to raise funds. And that is one of the things that I teach at Elevate Global. You have to go in with a plan with fundraising. I think you need to have a very clear value proposition. You need to have a very clear roadmap of how you are going to use those investors' funds. Like you need to show them, if you give me $1 million, I'm going to give you $10 million, right? That's what the VC is thinking. If I give you $1 million, how are you going to give me 10? So that needs to be part of your communication with that investor. Like, how are you going to grow? Is that going into marketing? Is it going into engineering? Like what are you using those funds for? So I think being really strategic in your use of funds is really, really important. And saying like the only thing that you need is to raise money, oh, man, that makes me really uncomfortable. So I really don't like that. So be cautious of that. Like if an investor asks you, like what is the one thing that you need right now? Say, what are you going to use that money for? Not the money itself. And then having a strategy. I think having an understanding of how much you need to raise, like what's appropriate for your raise, and understanding like which investors are in your area or in your vertical. There are a lot of different investors out there that you can raise money from. Not all of them are going to be the right fit for you. And you have to have thick skin, because a lot of investors are going to say no. A lot of investors might not even respond. So you have to have a plan. Like if you want to raise, let's easy numbers. Let's say you just want to raise 100,000, easy peasy. And you think it will take you 2 investors to get there. They're each going to put in 50. Maybe you need to meet with 20 investors to get 2 checks. So being able to have that grit and take feedback when appropriate, like investors are going to give you feedback. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But you have to know, when do I take that feedback? When do I go back and reiterate? And when do I throw that feedback out the door because I don't think they know what they're talking about? So fundraising is really, it's science and it's an art at the same time. There's a lot of moving pieces.
Wow. Great answer there. And thinking about an investor in this ecosystem, we're always looking for an exit or an IPO. We want to see that this is something that's actionable. In my case, we want to see that patients use this, they can benefit from it, and they will pay for it. Whether it's the hospital system or it is the actual patient or person, depending on the level of care that that initiative gives. So when we're thinking about this, we're looking at IPO, we're looking at exit opportunities. And that being the case, is it more attractive in your mind when a founder would like to stay with their company for the long haul? Or is it more attractive to you when you're looking at it that they have a very strong exit strategy?
I think that is very dependent on the investor, on the fund, on a lot of things. This goes back to like understanding how a venture fund works and how a VC thinks, because typically funds have a life cycle of 10 years. And so we are looking at like, what is our investment horizon? Where are we within the time frame of that fund? And we want to be, the end goal is to not only return that fund, but to ideally return that fund times 3 is typically the standard number, but anything times 2, times 3, times 4. And in order for an investor to raise a fund too, they have to have exits because they need to show their limited partners, hey, I'm a really good investor because 3 of my portfolio companies for my fund 1 had an exit. So time horizon, I think, is very dependent on the VC. If you are maybe more of like a consumer facing health product as opposed to like a biotech company, you're probably looking at investors who have tolerance for a different timeline. And the other thing to think about is CEOs often are really good at a certain phase of the startup process. So maybe there's a CEO who absolutely loves like the pre-seed stage. They love getting things off the ground, the ideas, but they don't want to scale it. And so they want somebody else to come in and to do that. And if you have a CEO who, I think either one are fine. Like you have one that wants to stay with the company long haul, or you have somebody that really likes to get something off the ground and then pass it on to somebody else. I think that's okay too. Thinking about like the time at which you will exit, again, like this is very dependent. I think it also depends maybe on the quality of the exit more so than the timeline of the exit. If you can have an exit in 5 years and you get acquired for, 10x, I think that could be a quality exit, right? Whereas maybe if you wait 10 years to IPO, maybe you don't get that 10x exit. So there's a lot of different factors, and I think it's a really individual investor fund conversation.
Thank you. So we have a question from Mr. Swafwani, and what he's asking is, what does it cost startups to go through the Elevate Global program?
So I am working on launching the Elevate Global program. It will be affordable, I will say, and I know that that means something different to everybody, but I am not going to ask startups to pay thousands and thousands of dollars. I want it to be something that's accessible to everybody. On my link tree, there is an option to sign up for the wait list. And so I will absolutely keep you updated on when I will have that program launched. In the meantime, I do have some consulting available for startups. You can also find that on my link tree. All that information is linked there.
Wonderful. This is exciting. We already have people who are interested in getting involved.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Great. You have talked about the services that Elevate Global can give to founders. Are there any other additional services that you're thinking about adding to the platform?
Like I said, it's a work in progress. So I would really like to bring different resources to startups because community is really, really important. Like I really see the value in community for startups. And so, like I said, that's having access to other founders who are going through it, maybe who've gone through it before, partnering with people who can help you make your pitch deck beautiful. I can help you with the content of your pitch deck. That's something I've done time and time again. Can I make it beautiful? I cannot. So I would love to partner with people who are offering services like that. Growing my network of investors. I have a network of investors, but as with an accelerator program, like I would never guarantee that somebody could raise money after going through the program. It's just not not a promise that I'm willing to make, and I don't think that anybody should make that promise either. So as time goes on, like I will be adding more services to the Elevate Global platform.
Okay, wonderful. So Parisha Cash has also asked if you are looking at cash or equity.
Cash.
Okay, plain and simple. Okay. Are there any things that you would like to leave our audience with as we wrap up? Because we're coming to the end of this webinar, and I will tell you, Hannah, the amount of information that you've shared and your generosity with this particular ecosystem has been bar none. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would love to close on encouraging founders to dream big. Like there were so many problems that the world needs solving, and the world needs founders like you who are really, really passionate, who are really excited, who really, really want to solve problems that the world needs to be solved. And so just dream big. Like investors, a lot of the times they'll tell you you need to dream bigger. Sometimes they'll tell you, oh, this is really unrealistic. I think that you should always like have in the back of your mind like the biggest goal possible. Like what is your ideal perfect world scenario? And that's what you should be driving to. Like find the people who want to support you, find the people that can help you get there, but just keep dreaming big.
That is fantastic advice, Hannah. There are so many people out there, as you said, who need these innovations and who need help. And so when a founder is looking at the universe, that is what they need to be thinking about. Like, how can I help? How can I give somebody something through my organization that will change their lives for the better? And that's why many of us are part of this ecosystem. So we want to build the world in a better way and solve some of these problems. And the interesting thing is that these solutions are already here. We just need to pull them out and bring them forward. Right? When you think about it, everything that was needed to make a car was already on the earth before. And people have been walking for centuries, miles and miles to get to one place or the other before the invention of a car. But it was right there under their noses all this time. So we need founders to like just search the issues and find the solutions. Hannah?
I agree.
Hannah, thank you so much. We've come to the end of our webinar, and we thank you. On behalf of Purelite Ventures, we thank you. And we are looking forward to seeing Elevate Global prosper. And we're looking forward to seeing founders flock to you to be able to make their next move in this ecosystem. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
And thank you, Callie, for moderating. Bye-bye.